The War of Kings. Lot had chosen well, or so it had seemed. When he lifted his eyes from the hill country and saw the Jordan Valley stretched out before him, green, well-watered, abundant, he had made what looked like the obvious decision. The best land, taken first. While his uncle Abram settled in the rocky hills of Canaan, Lot pitched his tent in the valley and moved toward a city called Sodom. It had looked like wisdom. It had looked like prosperity. But the valley of the Jordan was not simply a place of abundance. It was also a place of politics, of alliances and rivalries, and the slow, grinding machinery of power that operates beneath the surface of any prosperous region. And Lot, in choosing the best land, had chosen to live inside that machinery, without fully understanding what it would cost him when it finally moved. It was about to move. 12 years of submission. For 12 years, the cities of the Jordan Valley had served a king named Chedorlaomer. The Bible names him as king of Elam, a powerful kingdom to the east. And under his dominion, 5 cities of the valley paid tribute year after year: Sodom, Gomorrah, Admah, Zeboim, and Bela, also called Zoar. 5 kings, 5 cities, all of them subject to Chedorlaomer and his allies. For 12 years they paid. They sent what was demanded. They kept their heads down and their borders open and their tribute regular. And then, in the 13th year, they rebelled. One word: rebelled. The Bible doesn't tell us what sparked it, whether it was a particularly heavy demand, or a new king in one of the cities who decided enough was enough, or simply the slow accumulation of 12 years of resentment finally reaching a breaking point. Whatever the reason, in the 13th year, the 5 kings of the valley refused to pay. And in the 14th year, Chedorlaomer came to collect. The coalition of the East. He did not come alone. Chedorlaomer came with 3 allied kings: Amraphel, king of Shinar, Arioch, king of Elasar, and Tidal, king of Goim. 4 kings against 5. An alliance from the east, marching west, cutting a path of conquest through the region before turning toward the Jordan Valley. The Bible traces their route with the precision of a military record. They struck the Rephaim in Ashtaroth Karnaim, the Zuzim in Ham, the Emim in Shava Kiriathaim. They defeated the Horites in their hill country of Seir as far as El Paran. They turned back and came to En Mishpat, that is, Kadesh, and struck the country of the Amalekites and also the Amorites, who were dwelling in Hazazon Tamar. Name after name, place after place, a systematic campaign sweeping through the region, removing every potential source of resistance before closing in on the valley. The 5 kings of the valley came out to meet them. They assembled their forces in the valley of Siddim, the valley full of bitumen pits, that same rich, fertile ground that had drawn Lot and so many others to settle there. And they formed their battle lines. The battle did not go well for the valley. The defeat. Chedorlaomer and his 3 allied kings, 4 kings against 5, won. The kings of Sodom and Gomorrah fled. Some of their men fell into the bitumen pits that dotted the valley floor. Others fled to the hill country. The victorious Eastern coalition moved through the defeated cities, taking everything. All the possessions of Sodom and Gomorrah, all their food, everything, and the people. Among the people taken, among the captives marched away from the smoldering ruins of a city that had seemed so prosperous, so well situated, so worth choosing, was Lot, Abram's nephew, the man who had lifted his eyes and seen the best land and taken it. He was gone, a captive, being marched east with everything he owned, away from the valley he had chosen and toward a future that had nothing to do with any choice he had made. The messenger. One man escaped. The Bible identifies him simply as someone who had escaped, and he came to Abram the Hebrew. Abram was living by the oaks of Mamre the Amorite, brother of Eshcol and Aner. These were men who were in covenant with Abram, allies, neighbors, part of the network of relationships he had built in the years since arriving in Canaan. The escaped man told Abram what had happened. Kedorlaomer, the battle, the defeat of the 5 kings, the taking of Sodom, and Lot, his brother's son, taken captive. The Bible records Abram's response without drama or deliberation. He acted. 318 men. When Abram heard that his kinsman had been taken captive, he led forth his trained men born in his house, 318 of them, and went in pursuit as far as Dan. 318 men. Not an army in the conventional sense. Not a professional military force with commanders and supply lines and siege equipment. These were the men of Abram's household, servants born into his service, trained for exactly this kind of situation. In the ancient world, a wealthy man's household was also his militia. These men had grown up under Abram's roof. They knew how to fight. But 318 men against a coalition that had just defeated 5 kings and their armies. Think about what Abram was choosing to do. Kedorlaomer had swept through the entire region. He had beaten everyone who had tried to stand against him. His campaign had been methodical, overwhelming, total. And Abram, a man whose primary identity in the text up to this point has been as a wandering herdsman, a man of tents and flocks and altars, was going to chase him down with 318 household servants. He went in pursuit as far as Dan. He divided his forces against them by night, him and his servants, and struck them, and pursued them to Hobah, north of Damascus. A night raid. Divided forces striking from multiple directions in the darkness. Confusion, speed, surprise. The kind of tactics that a smaller force uses against a larger one when it cannot win in open battle. And it worked. Then he brought back all the possessions, and also brought back his kinsman Lot with his possessions, and the women and the people. All the possessions, all the people. Lot, alive, free, returned from captivity. The women, everyone the Eastern Coalition had taken from the valley. Abram had done what 5 kings with their combined armies had failed to do. He had taken on the victors of the entire regional campaign, and won. The Valley of Shaveh. After the victory, after the long march back through the night, through the hill country, back toward Canaan with the recovered captives and the recovered goods, 2 kings came out to meet Abram in the Valley of Shaveh, which is the King's Valley. The first was the king of Sodom. He had survived the battle by fleeing. His city had been sacked, his people taken, his possessions stripped. And now the man who had recovered everything was returning. The king of Sodom came out to meet him. But before the king of Sodom could speak, before whatever transaction he had come to propose could take place, Someone else appeared. The Bible does not answer these questions. It simply presents Melchizedek, suddenly, without introduction, without genealogy, without explanation, standing in the king's valley with bread and wine, blessing the man who had just returned from battle. Blessed be Abram by God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth. And blessed be God Most High, who has delivered your enemies into your hand. Two blessings, one for Abram, one for God. The priest of Salem standing between the two, speaking words that acknowledged what had really happened in the darkness north of Damascus. It had not been 318 trained servants who had defeated Chedorlaomer's coalition. God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, had delivered the enemies into Abram's hand. And Abram gave him a tenth of everything, a tithe, the first tithe recorded in the Bible. From the victorious warrior to the mysterious priest, a tenth of all the recovered spoils, freely given before any other transaction had taken place. Melchizedek. And Melchizedek, king of Salem, brought out bread and wine. He was priest of God Most High. Salem, the city that would later be known as Jerusalem. And Melchizedek, whose name means, in the Hebrew, King of Righteousness, was its king. But he was not only its king, he was also a priest of God Most High, El Elyon, the highest name for God available in that language, in that world. Who was this man? Where had he come from? How was it that in a world full of gods that were not God, in a land that Abram had entered as a stranger, there was a king and priest who served the same God that Abram served, the king of Sodom's offer? Then the king of Sodom spoke, "Give me the persons, but take the goods for yourself." It was a reasonable offer. The people of Sodom were his subjects. He wanted them back. The goods were the spoils of war. Abram had won them and was entitled to keep them. By the conventions of the ancient world, this was a generous arrangement. Abram could walk away from this battle significantly wealthier than he had entered it. Abram's answer was immediate, and it was not what the king of Sodom expected. "I have lifted my hand to the Lord, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that I would not take a thread or a sandal strap or anything that is yours, lest you should say, 'I have made Abram rich.'" Not a thread, not a sandal strap, nothing. Abram had made an oath to the same God whose name Melchizedek had just spoken, God Most High, possessor of heaven and earth, that he would take nothing from the king of Sodom. Whatever Abram had, whatever wealth he carried, whatever future came to him, it would not come from the king of Sodom. It would not come from this city, this valley, this world that had chosen its own gods and its own ways. If God had promised to make Abram's name great, then God would do it, not the king of Sodom. He asked only that his allies, Aner, Eshcol, and Mamre, the men who had fought beside him, be allowed to take their share, their choice, not his to make for them. And that was it. The recovered goods returned to Sodom. The people returned to their city. Lot, we can assume, returned to his tent in the valley, to the life he had chosen, to the city that the eastern kings had just sacked, and that God had just, through Abram, returned to him. Whether Lot understood what had just happened, what it had cost,
who had paid it, and what it said about the uncle he had separated from on a hillside not so long ago, the Bible does not say.
318 men against a coalition that had just defeated the armies of 5 cities. A night raid in unfamiliar territory, deep in the aftermath of a war Abram had nothing to do with, except that his nephew was somewhere in the middle of it. He didn't hesitate. He didn't calculate the odds. He heard that Lot had been taken, the same Lot who had chosen the best land and walked away. And he went. And then, at the moment of victory, when the king of Sodom offered him everything he was entitled to, he took nothing. Not a thread, not a sandal strap. What does it mean to trust a promise enough to refuse everything that isn't it? And that figure in the valley, Melchizedek, appearing from nowhere with bread and wine and a blessing. Who was he really? The Bible will return to his name centuries later, in ways no one standing in the King's Valley that day could have anticipated. In the next episode, the promises become a covenant. God speaks to Abram in a vision, and Abram asks the question that has been underneath everything from the beginning. How can I know? And God answers in a way that no one has ever seen before or since. A deep sleep falls, darkness descends, and something passes between the divided pieces of a sacrifice that will seal what God has promised forever.